Hello?
Is this Cody Leach?
Who is this?
Just listen. Someone is coming for you. He already has you in his sights. You won't see him coming. He's more evasive than anything you've ever seen, and more formidable than anything you've ever encountered. 1 minute, Mr. Leach.
The fuck? Oh, shit. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Breaking Bad Week on the Cody Leach channel. Now talking about Season 3 of Breaking Bad. As I've said in the first two reviews, in case you're starting here, this is my favorite show of all time. I think that the entire show is perfection, start to finish. So while I am reviewing the season, this is in fact more of a celebration of the show all week long, leading up to the release of El Camino this Friday. So check out the first two reviews of Season 1 and Season 2 that I've aired earlier this week, and now we will talk about Season 3, where this is the point in the show where the show really finds its tone as far as where it's going to go. Like, Season 1 had a lot of a dark comedy edge. Season 2 definitely heads more into the direction of where this season where this season goes as far as the tone, where there's still that dark comedic edge, where there's a lot more tension, a lot more darkness in there. This season almost abandons a lot of that comedic edge. There's moments.
Oh, you're gonna pepper spray?
You understand
perfect. That is just perfect. Pepper spray the man who's expressing his opinion under the First Amendment.
But a lot of that edge of that tone for full-on darkness, for tension, for this boiling kind of ratcheting tension throughout the entire season as you're waiting for where things are going to go bad, because there's this overhanging cloud of where is this going to go wrong from start to finish in Season 3. And overall in this one, this season really explores Walt's love for Jesse, because for all intents and purposes, this season finds Walt in the position that he wants to be in, where he is the cook, he is in charge, he's working for a professional manufacturer, he's making millions of dollars for all intents and purposes for the amount of time that he's working. Yes, he's got to fix his family shit, but he's in the place that he wants to be as far as his meth cooking business. And it's really his love for Jesse and his struggle to stay on top of Jesse and have that father-son relationship with him and try to bring him into the business that kind of brings it all to shit by the end of the season. And it's one of the things that it really stood out to me on this watch, because a lot of ways, whenever you watch Breaking Bad, you see all the bad decisions that Walt makes that causes all of this chaos, that causes the chaos with Gus, that causes the chaos that goes through to Season 5. But in a lot of ways, Jesse really is the sparking point that causes a lot of these problems. Maybe inadvertently, maybe unknowingly, but it is that Walt and Jesse dynamic of this season and of the show that brings things down to the dour level that they end up going from the end of this season through to the finish of the series. So going down the line of characters, Walt in this season, he's dealing with the aftermath of this plane explosion. He's dealing with the aftermath of Skyler and his kids leaving him, where Walter Jr. is at odds, doesn't know what's going on. Skyler basically figures it out within the first couple of episodes that he is in a drug dealing business, and he full on admits it to her at one point. But she doesn't want anything to do with him. She wants a divorce. She doesn't want him in the house, doesn't want him around the kids, starts to have an affair with Ted, good old Ted Beneke.
I fucked Ted.
And Walt is kind of battling all of this while facing the light at the end of the tunnel as far as his meth trek has gone, where Jesse is gotten out of rehabilitation. You know, Walt is still very much in his life as far as like that father relationship for the first part of the season, and you know, wanting him to be healthy. Jesse's kind of going off doing his own healthy version as far as his addiction into the meth business, where he's cooking on his own. He can finally cook basically to the level of Walt, and it pisses Walt off, again with that ego. And over throughout the season, you kind of see Walt and Jesse kind of going at odds and then bringing each other back to each other, where you have they're on the same page, they're happy with where things are in their life for the most part. Walt's ego gets in the way whenever Jesse produces this meth saying, hey, I need to deal with your boy because I can cook this good too, and Walt just smears all over it and snarls all over it and basically just starts demeaning Jesse like he does whenever he has his ego tested. That puts them at odds. Then Walt is full on like, all right, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna cook for Gus just because I don't want Jesse to do it. And it puts them at odds because Jesse is cooking the same product, but Jesse has this history of addiction and this history of riskiness that Gus doesn't want a part of, so he goes with Walt, who in the end might have been the worst decision of the two, because Walt has that ego and Walt has that longing to be in control that manifests his personality slowly throughout this entire series. And then they go back to each other whenever things start to get a little bit testy with Hank getting right on to this closest he has ever gotten to catching Walt and Jesse, where you have this great scene. Hank is on the trails of Jesse. Jesse leads him all the way to this RV while Walt is trying to get rid of it, knowing good and well that Hank is this close. They're both locked inside of this RV. Hank just on the other side of the door, ready to bust both of them.
This is my own private domicile and I will not be harassed! Bitch!
And then Walt has to pull out that evil little scheming ass of his and get Hank out of the picture using Marie as leverage. And again, just kind of brings them to this point where Hank doesn't respond very well to this, beats the living shit out of Jesse. Jesse basically threatens Walt with, now your brother-in-law is mine. And that makes him pull Jesse back into this business, kind of not really wanting him there, but wanting to keep him close enough to keep him under control, to keep his family together. And then you have all the tension that sparks whenever they're in this lab. Things are going great. They're millionaires, but Jesse doesn't like the percentage that they're getting. Jesse doesn't have the trust or the confidence in Gus or Mike that Walt has, and starts to kind of cause some tension there. And eventually gets to the point where the two closing episodes of this series, Half Measures and Full Measures, where Walt and Jesse's relationship come to a gigantic head as far as his relationship with Gus, where Jesse finds out that Gus's drug dealers are the ones that killed Combo in season 2 and used a kid to do it. And he finds out through this relationship that he has with Andrea, which is a really nice it's a kind of a sick way that he gets to know her, because he's really just trying to sell drugs to her, but it's a nice little relationship that they have because it shows the humanity in Jesse. You know, Jesse's got a character where he fucks up, he does bad shit, he knows he's the villain at one point and kind of just accepts it, but he definitely has this humanity where he loves kids. And you know, you had the episode Peekaboo in season 2 where he was kind of protecting that kid of the two meth heads. This one you have Andrea and her son Brock, where he really kind of feels, you know, family towards them. And when he finds out that Andrea's brother, a kid, was the one who murdered Combo on orders from these drug dealers, on possibly orders from Gus, he snaps. And he wants to take these guys out, not only for revenge for his friend Combo, but to make a statement against not using kids to do this kind of shit. And it's kind of a fuck you to Gus and Walt in a lot of ways. And when Walt won't help him because he has more alliance to Gus, Jesse goes off on his own, and Walt has to come in Half Measures is probably my favorite episode of the entire series. I will say that. A lot of people would say the finale, or one of the episodes towards the finale, Ozymandias, and we'll get into all that in season 5. I probably will do a ranking at some point where I rank my favorite Breaking Bad episodes, but I think Half Measures is my favorite episode because of this test of Walt and Jesse's relationship. And then you get to the scene where Jesse has to face Gus head on and tell Gus no, or you get to see Giancarlo Esposito's the terror that guy can bring with just the subtlety of his performance, where he tells Jesse, like, you're gonna shake the hands of these men that work for me, you're gonna squash this now, and they're not gonna do anything with kids anymore, and you're just gonna go back to doing what you want to do. Do you understand? And Jesse's like, fuck you, they better not do anything with kids anymore. And just this great tense scene. And then finds out that they're not using kids anymore, but they killed the one that they were using. And the whole scene at the end of that episode where Jesse is using meth once again to kind of get pumped up slowly, like tension in this season, like slowly walking towards these two drug dealers. And the way that the scene kind of plays out in slow motion, where they get out of their car and they see him and they start pulling their weapons, and then that fucking Aztec comes out of nowhere and Walt just takes them out and full on murders both of them and shoots one of them in the head. Run. Like, God, I love Half Measures so much. And I didn't even talk about the scene with Mike. Like, we'll talk about Mike in a little bit, but his scene in that episode is one of the greatest Mike scenes of the entire series too. But Half Measures, the way that it just kind of, Walt eventually has to choose Jesse and says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to completely fuck up everything that I have going for me because I'm going to save this kid's life and because I'm going to defend him because he's doing what's right ultimately. And then you move into Full Measures, to where all of the ramifications of that decision are starting to kind of slowly behind the scenes build up. And you see the pieces being laid out that Gus is not willing to take that risk anymore. And Gus is trying to put more eggs into the basket of Gale and set up the pieces to where he can murder Walt and still continue on with his blue meth empire. And you don't know if Walt sees it. You don't know if anybody else sees it, but Walt does see it because he's one step ahead of everybody. Building to one of the most awesome season finales of the entire series, with him being yanked in the middle of the night whenever he's got Jesse waiting in the wings to go and murder Gale because he knows that that's Gus's contingency plan, but they get to him before he can get to Jesse. They take him to the laundromat. You have this really intense scene where they're walking him towards the big ass washer that's lifted up, which is the hidden entrance into the lab.
Walter, the sooner you figure out what this is, the sooner we all go home.
Please don't do this. Mike, you don't have to do this.
Yeah, unfortunately I do, Walter.
Mike is there. You've got the one dickhead who's always got that fucked up look on his face, and you know that they're there to kill Walt. They say they're there because there's a mess in the lab, but Walt even knows it and starts begging for his life. And you feel like this is it. How is he gonna get out of it? This is the moment that Walter White has been outsmarted. Gus has been just that half a step ahead of him, and now it's going to come to a head. He begs Mike, like, I can tell you where Jesse is. I can call him right now. I'll find out where he is. I'll give you him. Just don't kill me. And you feel like he's gonna give up Jesse. You feel like the acting is so good by Bryan Cranston that you believe it. You believe he's gonna turn on Jesse because it's been so wishy-washy the entire season with their hot and cold relationship. And he gets a hold of that phone. You got a lead start. Go do it. They got me at the laundromat. And then just, you're like, oh, fuck.
Did you do it? No, I didn't do it. I can't now. It's gonna have to be you.
What? No way, man.
Listen to me. You're closer than we are. You'll have about a 20-minute lead. They've got me at the laundry and they're going to kill me. Jesse, do it now! Do it, bitch! Do it fast! Do it, Jesse! Do it!
Now the tension is going, and just stares at Mike. 6353 Juan Tabo, apartment 6. And just Mike's face where he's holding the gun, he's like, yeah, like, God, so awesome. Like that's one of the premier moments of Walter White just being a fucking badass. We're like, yeah, what now, Mike? I love you too, but God, how you like them apples, bitch? And it was such a great finale and just ends you on a cliffhanger. It's really the only, if you count the cliffhanger between the first half of season 5 and the second half of season 5, I guess, but it's really the only season that ends with a genuine cliffhanger where you're like, what the fuck happens? Brilliance. Those 2 episodes, like for a 1-2 punch, half measures and full measures, you might not get a better 1-2 punch in this entire series. Arguably in season 5, we'll see when we get there, but man, those 2 episodes. But now I need to backpedal. I need to talk about the twins, the Salamanca brothers. These guys are terrifying. Like, they open the season with them crawling towards that picture of Walter White, and you realize that that's who their target is. And you spend most of the season wondering when they're going to find him or what they're going to do. And there's times when they come this close, but Gus has a little bit of pull with the cartel. But these guys are just a terrifying presence to where they never say a word until their last moments. And just the attire that they wear, the little skull boot to where, like, you have that scene in the back of that truck where the guy's just kind of talking freely and then he sees the boot and he's like, so some kind of a cartel message is in that boot, but these guys were just a brilliant antagonist to insert into this season because, like I've already talked about, season 3 is tension. Season 3 is where the tension is at its highest up to this point from the first 3 seasons. And a lot of it comes from these 2 characters, knowing that they're on the hunt for Walt. And Walt has no idea. Even getting to the point where they're sitting outside of his bathroom while he's taking a shower, having no idea what they're doing, just holding an axe, waiting to viciously murder him. And Mike sees them, gets a hold of Gus. Gus gets a hold of one of the cartel and then calls them off. And they just leave that little scythe message outside of his house with spray paint. Like, these 2 characters are a great addition. And they go to one of the greatest moments of this series too, with 1 minute, which is the episode where Hank really gets brought down, where he's this close to Walt, he's this close to Jesse. You know, he's kind of healing from the whole thing where he's viciously beat Jesse and has to kind of give up his gun and his badge, and he realizes that he's made mistakes, but the cartel gets pushed onto Hank by Gus because he's the one who actually murdered Tuco. And you have this, one of the best 2-minute scenes in the entire series where you get this call from a muffled voice that you know is Gus, and he's warning Hank, like, these 2 men are closing in on you, you have less than a minute, they've come to kill you, click. And then just the tension in that scene alone where Hank is looking around and doesn't know whether to believe it or not, and then you see like a little bit of the 2 brothers' heads and they split in the kind of sea of cars in this parking lot. And the shootout that happens in that scene is intense, where you feel like Hank is a goner, and the badass that Hank is comes through in the end. And it sends Hank into the point where the rest of the season, he's kind of healing for the rest of it. You know, he keeps getting this close to Walt, and whether or not Walt's the one calling the shots or not, he keeps getting this much closer to death every single time, where he almost gets killed by Tuco. Now he almost gets killed by these 2 twins, and his bloodlust to figure out who Heisenberg is keeps bringing him to the end of his mortality over and over again, and possibly to the closest point until the finale, obviously, of 1 minute, where he's this close to death. And the rest of the season is him healing. And even, like I said, like with Half Measures being one of my favorite episodes, or possibly my favorite, brings one of the funniest moments of the entire series, where he's being rehabilitated, he can't really walk, he's stuck in the hospital, and Marie doesn't believe him. Marie thinks he's being a little bitch, and you get this whole scene with him, which is one of the best scenes between these 2 characters, where she starts playing around with his dick underneath the blanket, and he's like, what are you doing? And she's like, look, he's like, if I can get the groundhog to see his shadow, you can get out of here. And they kind of make this bet that if he can get a boner, then he gets taken out of the hospital. And the next scene, he's getting wheeled out with his flowers and shit. He's like,
It's just sad. I mean, I really feel sorry for you, Mary, you know? I really do. It's just, it's pathetic.
That's good. Keep talking. Protest. Struggle.
Marie, give up. I mean, seriously, it's not.
Again, like I said, the show never quite loses its comedic edge. It just kind of gets overtaken by the tension and the darkness a lot, but that is one of the funniest moments of the entire series. But Hank's journey, especially where it comes to that culmination in 1 minute in season 3, is really just facing how dangerous his path towards Walt is going to be and has been thus far. Now, talking about Skyler, she gets a little bit more tolerable in this season with not being quite as hot and cold as she was in season 2, but she's at her most hypocritical in this season too, because she doesn't really want Walt around, so she ends up going to the point of having an affair to push him away. Then gets, she's so morally outraged by what he's doing, doesn't want anything to do with him, but then comes to a point where she kind of wants to insert herself into the business and comes up with this idea where she's kind of ignoring everything that Saul Goodman is saying and saying, we're gonna buy the car wash, we're not buying this laser tag, and I'm gonna be your Danny, and I'm gonna be the one who launders all of your money. And it's cool because it feels like this path of healing towards these two characters to where suddenly they're gonna be like this power couple, and they certainly are for a little while in the series, but it does make you look back at some of the things that she said and it's just like, bitch, you're a hypocrite. But still, she's enjoyable this season. Her kind of path to where she's kind of getting sucked in by the darkness a little bit is interesting to watch.
On the one hand, sure, she snuck off the reservation to get some dirty, damp, and deep. On the other hand...
And I will say this, Walter Jr. is really good in this season. Like I said in the first season review, he's kind of the most irrelevant character for a lot of the show. He's the one that you just kind of see popping in at breakfast time here and there. He gets some standout moments, one of which we'll talk about in the next season, but season 3, you see a lot of drama with him not being able to deal with his parents' divorce, and it kind of creates this moment of tension within the family because Skyler's really right for a lot of the reasons that she's kind of keeping Walt out of the house, but she can't tell Walter Jr. about it. So it just appears from a child, from a teenager, a mood swinging perspective that she's just being a bitch and dad needs to be let back into this house. And Walter certainly plays that up with, playing to his son and playing the innocent card very well. So he has some really good moments within this season too of just kind of being stuck in the middle of this battle between Skyler and Walt.
Are you seriously doing that?
We're not kicking you out of anywhere, son. We love you. And this is your house as much as it is ours. But your mom and I need some time alone, and you know that. We explained that to you.
You haven't explained jack shit. You want me out? Explain to me why. Why do I have to go to Uncle Hank's? Give me the exact reason or I'm not going anywhere.
This is not going to be a debate.
Now, Gus is one of those characters too that really gets a lot more focus in this season. Like, you really get to figure out a lot more how this guy ticks. And what's so awesome about him as an antagonist is that he's so calm and cool and calculated. Like, this is not a guy that explodes like Walt. This is not a guy that has to, physically intimidate you. This is a guy that walks in, straightens up his tie, tells you how things are gonna go, and says it so calm and calculated and with such a low register in his voice that changes whenever he's serious and whenever he's kind of putting on a play, that you're scared enough to do it. And you get to see how he has this tension going on with the cartel that he never fully lets it get the better of him. He never really fully lets it, like he's slamming things against the ground, like, God, how am I gonna get these fuckers? Like, the whole time you see little bits of his plan come to fruition, he's just calm about it. He's like, yeah, I knew that was gonna happen. Takes a phone call from the guy while he's getting blown away by the, people in machine guns, and he's just like, throws it away, just so calm and calculated that he's badass and he's cool, but he's terrifying.
Maybe we come pay you a visit. Maybe we come. ¿Qué es eso? ¿Qué es eso? Vayan a ver. Vamos. ¿Qué diablos está pasando?
And then you get Mike in this season, and this is where Mike becomes series regular. And Mike, like I said in season 2 review, is possibly my favorite character of the show. Like him and Walt are head to head as far as my favorite characters of the show because he's just so awesome. And the performance by Jonathan Banks, just like Gus, just calm and cool and calculated, but Mike is like cooler about it. Like, this is a guy that you're so fascinated with what brought him to this point. What training, what kind of experiences did he have in his life as a cop or whatever else he did beyond that has made him so smart and badass as this hitman, as this fixer, as this, security front for Gus, that you want to know so much about him. And he's only sprinkled here and there throughout the season where he saves Walt at the last minute, or, even in half measures, like going back to that episode. I'm telling you, I love it. This whole dialogue that we get between Mike and Walt whenever he really doesn't know what he wants to do about Jesse. Do I want to let Jesse go about this alone because he's fucking up all the works, or do I want to embrace him and really take on that father-son role and protect my son for all intents and purposes, and give the middle finger to Gus and say, look, he's right, but I'm going to go down this path. And it's all from this dialogue that he has with Mike. Mike doesn't intend it that way, but like he says, interesting how words kind of are up to interpretation. He gives this whole speech talking about never going halfway, about how he was a cop, and there was this one piece of shit that used to always beat on his wife, and every single week, every single month, they would be called to their house and she would make up some excuse that she fell in the bathtub or whatever, but everybody knew he was beating her. And then one day he was taken to the station just like regular, and the guy was in the back seat whistling something, and just something inside of Mike snapped, and instead of going left, he went right and took this guy all the way out into the desert, put him on his knees, put the gun in his mouth, and said, this is it, this is done. And ended up having that moment of conscience and threatened him and said, this is what's gonna happen if this ever happens again, and took a half measure. And then the guy went back and killed his wife. And then he just, this whole calm, very interesting story that he gives, and the way that Jonathan Banks tells it is just so captivating. And the way that you see Walt responding to this story, where he's listening to it, but he's just thinking about it in a different way than what Mike intends. And that whole scene is one of my favorite scenes of this entire series. And again, one of the reasons why I love Half Measures so much as an episode. But Mike, just a great addition to this show, and this show would not be half of what it is without Mike. Now, I need to talk about the Fly episode. Yes, probably the most controversial episode in this entire series, because you have people that will absolutely agree with everything that I say and think that this is an absolutely perfect 5 out of 5 show, but hate the Fly episode. And then you have people that think that the Fly is this unsung, brilliant episode and this moment in season 3. And I don't know if I would go as far as to say brilliant, but I'm much more on that camp. I'm about 70-80% of the way on that camp. And I feel like The Fly is a very misunderstood episode, if nothing else. It's directed by Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson directed 3 episodes in this series. This was the first one. I know, the guy that ruined Star Wars. But Rian Johnson is a damn good director. And I'm not a fan of The Last Jedi, so I'm not even talking about Star Wars, but just as a director, he's a great director, and he shows it in all 3 of the episodes that he directs. With Fly is a very bottled, meticulous, metaphorical episode. If you take it at face value, it feels like a waste, and I can understand why people that don't get into metaphors or feel like they could have given these metaphors in a different way, I can understand why you don't like the episode, because it feels very segregated from the rest of the season. It's just an episode in the middle of everything going on where Walt finds a fly in the lab and locks it in, and him and Jesse are trying to kill this fly for an hour. And if you take it at face value, I can understand why you wouldn't like it. But if you look at what this episode brings and what it represents and what it explores while this thing with the fly is going on, I think it's a brilliant moment inside of season 3. And it's definitely a nice calm before the storm of that 1-2 punch of half measures and full measures. Fly really explores the madness of Walter White. And it really explores his loss of control and his constant grasp to gain control. Like, it's at the point where he's just losing control of everything in his life. He's losing control of what happens at home. He's losing control of what's happening with Jesse. He's losing control of his good business relationship with Gus. Everything is just melting down around him. And you get it all embodied in this kind of vendetta that he has to get this one singular fly out of the lab. And he's going to get this fly at all costs. He's going to go as far as it possibly takes to get this one little piece of uncontrollable matter in his life out to try to regain his control. And it's all embodied. It's all embodied through this entire struggle of this episode from beginning to end. It's also a perfect bottled exploration of Walt and Jesse's relationship. Just look at how their relationship is hot and cold throughout the entire series up to this point, and it's all in this one episode once again, where they show up. Jesse doesn't quite know what's going on with Walt. Walt's so headstrong about one thing, Jesse doesn't get it. They end up having this little comedic battle for a while. And then by the end of the episode, whenever Walt is just falling to exhaustion, also because of the sleeping pills that Jesse gave him, he starts to face his own mortality again. And he has this great speech about, this great line of dialogue about the perfect moment that he should have died. And again, a great moment for that character where he realizes, like, if I had complete control of my life the way that I'm so grasping for right now, this would have been the perfect moment for everything to end and everything would have been fine. But I had to live past that moment. Great face of his own mortality and face of what he has done this far for that character. But going back to Walt and Jesse, from that moment, you get probably the most unadulterated father-son dynamic between those two characters that maybe you get for the entire series in this episode. When he's starting to fall to exhaustion, he's letting Jesse take on the rest of the task of getting this fly, and he's holding the ladder for him, and he's starting to face all the things that he's done, and he says that he's sorry for Jane, and he comes this close to admitting that he's the one that let Jane die, but just clears his conscience enough to have that remorse that you don't get from this character very often, and this genuine emotion from Bryan Cranston in this scene, apologizing to him about Jane, which for Jesse is simply taken as, I'm sorry you had to go through this, and for Walt it means so much more. But even beyond that, just technical aspects. Like I said, Rian Johnson's a great director, and he chooses a lot of really cool camera angles, a lot of cool shots where, like, you zoom in on Walt's glasses and it shows the fly down here, the whole fly inside of the little red light on his smoke detector. It's a really well done episode that I understand on its face value if a lot of people don't like it, but for me, it has so much more of value inside of it that I think it's a shame that a lot of people don't quite see what I see whenever I watch Fly. So I put a little segment in this season review just to talk about this in hopes that maybe some of you that have seen Fly and didn't quite get it can see and can kind of hear what I see when I watch Fly, and maybe rewatch it and see it in a different light. But overall, guys, I absolutely love season 3. I think season 3 is really where this show plants its feet in the sand and says, this is the ride that you're going to be on for the rest of this series. And it's just a great season overall. So much tension, like the most tension that we've had in this show up to this point. A great exploration once again of Walt and Jesse's relationship with this hot and cold, and needing to be away from each other, but just longing to be back with each other, and all the problems that causes. The whole introduction of the Super Lab and Los Pollos Hermanos and Gus and Mike. Awesome additions to this show, and the fact that they become series regulars just really makes this season stand out as the best thus far from season 1 through 3. Skyler, her involvement kind of being this thing where as an audience member you want them to become kind of like this meth kingpin power couple, and you get to see elements of that here and there. Some good moments of comedy. Full measures and half measures, a great 1-2 punch, and like I said, half measures possibly being my favorite episode of the entire 5-season series. So season 3, once again, brilliance from Breaking Bad. So if you're still along for the ride and want to see where Walt and Jesse go with their relationship with Gus and their meth empire and all of the crazy blood-soaked directions that it takes, look no further than season 3 of Breaking Bad and go out and buy it. So what do you guys think of season 3 of Breaking Bad? Is this your favorite season? Is this your least favorite season? Do you feel like a big improvement from season 2? Do you love the more series regular direction that Gus and Mike take? Do you love half measures or full measures as much as I do? What are your thoughts on season 3? Let me know down below in the comment section and we will talk about it. And please hit that subscribe button so that you can stay along and go through season 4 and 5 and eventually El Camino on Friday on this channel, so you can keep it locked and see all of that Breaking Bad greatness. So please like and share this video. Look down in the video description below for social media links like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and my Teespring store just below that, which has all of my merchandise and all of my designs by Woody Bowen. I've got 31 on 31 designs down there leading up to that this Halloween. I've got the Autop Stream logo down there, so check all that stuff out, guys. And if you want to check out my Patreon page, that link is in the video description as well. Great way to give back to this channel, help this channel grow, and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only if you decide to become a patron. So check all that out, guys. And as always, if you want to check out all these reviews, you can check them out by clicking right over here.